So this is going to be the first video for Module 2 linear equations, and it's just going to be some notes and terms that I'm going to get you to write into your ISN on page 33. If you haven't put together your Module 2 foldables, you're going to find in class notebook, when you go into Mod 2, there is a new page that says Module 2 ISN pictures. And what I've done is I've taken pictures of my ISN and I wrote some notes in red, so it might give you some guidelines on how I want you to cut out or fold the foldables. And sometimes you'll see some extra instructions to the right of that foldable that might help you get these pink sheets in, because we're starting Module 2 linear equations. Today, though, we're going to do some notes on ISN page 33. So if you haven't already done so, you're going to pause the video now and get your ISN together. Cut out 4 of these grids because we're going to glue those onto page 33, and then we're going to write some notes and terms on this page. You should be on ISN page 33, and the title is Coordinate Plane and Graphing Lines. This is a coordinate plane. It has 2 axes, the x-axis, the horizontal axis, and the y-axis. I always say y to the sky, so you can remember it's vertical. They cross at the point 0, 0. That is called the origin. And you write the coordinate points 0, 0. Okay? These coordinate points are important when you're graphing a line or finding a point on this graph. So these coordinate points are written like x is first and y. You don't remember? It's alphabetical. X and then y. It is the horizontal direction, and then it is the vertical direction when you're looking for a point. So if I had, for example, to find a point like A, usually capital letters indicate a point, and I'm going to go A is 2, 3. I'm going to start at the origin. I'm going to go over 2 to the right because that's the positive x direction, and then I'm going to go up 3. That point, A, is in this quadrant where everything is positive, and it's called quadrant 1. That's when x is positive and y is positive. If I was to graph another point, like B, for example, and I wrote -3, 2, I'm looking at my x direction. I'm going to go over 3 and up 2. This is my point B. It is in the second quadrant where x is negative and y is positive. I think you're getting the hang of these points. So let's just fill out this quadrant down here is quadrant 3. It is when x is negative and y is negative. Okay, so you've gone to the left and you've gone down if you're in quadrant 3. And finally, quadrant 4 is going to be where your x is positive and your y coordinate is going to be negative. So you need to be able to identify which quadrant a point falls in and label it, and find those coordinate points. Some other terms that I want you to remember when we're talking about coordinate planes. These points, the x, when you're graphing these lines, we typically do it using a table of values. You can see a horizontal table of values, or I often write and I often use a vertical table of values. These will indicate the points that you're going to graph. All right, so some other terms that I want to talk about, though, is if you are looking at the x, we often call that the independent variable. Or sometimes you've seen it as the input. Okay, so sometimes you'll hear that called as x is the input. I like to say you get to pick x, and then you find out what y is. So y depends, it is the dependent variable on what you chose for x, or it's the output value when you find it, when you substitute it in. So when you will see these points on the graph, or if you had x is 0 and y is 0, that's the point you're going to plot on your graph. I often like to say we pick the points, and you really want to know what's going to happen around the origin. So usually if I am graphing a line, I'm going to pick points like 0 and -1 and 1, or easy points to figure out, and then I'm going to plug in those x points to find out what y was. And then I'm going to graph a line. So let's try one of these. The first line we're going to graph, and you do this on one of your bottom graphs, is y equals x. Now we're dealing with two variables. When we were solving linear equations, we only had one variable defined. Now we have two variables. So we can graph it on, instead of a number line, we're graphing it on a coordinate plane. So again, if I am graphing y equals x, which is a huge important line that we're going to talk about all the time, I'm going to go to my table of values, x and y. I'm going to pick some values for x. Like I said, I like to see what's happening around the origin, so I pick some values before, like -2, -1. Let's see what happens when x equals 0. This becomes a very important value when we're looking at linear equations. And then 1 and 2. Well, in my equation, y equals x. When y equals x, I plug in the x. That meant, when x is equal to -2, that meant y was -2. And when x, because I'm looking at this equation, y equals x, when x is -1, y is -1. When x is 0, y is 0. This line goes through the origin. When x is 1, y is 1. When x is 2, y is 2. Now you can plot these points because you know when x is -2, y was 2 on this line. So I'm going to write that when x was -2, y was -2. And -1 and 0, 1, 2. I'm going to plot those points. Well, that's not only true at these points, it's true at every other point between those ones. If I had picked x equals 0.5, then y would have been 0.5. If I had picked x equals -1/4, y was -1/4. Whatever x is, y is. So it must be true along this line that y equals x. These are all the points on the coordinate plane where y equals x. Okay, any real number you could think of. When x was pi 3.14, then y was pi 3.14. All right, so that is the huge important line that we will keep going back to. It's actually called a parent line. But that's why you graph the entire line. And I like to see little arrows on the end because it keeps going. Unless it tells you otherwise, you're going to graph those arrows on the end of your line and stretch it out so you can really see what's happening on this line. All right, there's one of the lines I want you to graph on your notes. Here's the next line. Try this one. What about when y equals 1/3 of x? So again, I'm going to go back to my table of values. When all else fails, you can always use a table of values to graph a line. But remember, we get to pick x. So I'm going to pick some significant x values because I want the math easy. So if I am taking 1/3 of a number, I'm going to pick a number that's divisible by 3. I'm going to pick -6 and -3. I always like to see what's happening around 0. I'm going to pick 3 and 6. So when I plug this in, I know that y is 1/3 of x. Well, if x is -6, then I can substitute this in, and I know that y is -2. When I'm finding 1/3 of my x value, and I picked -3, and I only picked this again because it's easy. It makes my numbers easy, then y is -1. When x is 0, I am substituting in 0 for x to find out what y equals. Y is 0. When x is 3, I'm going to take 1/3 of 3. Remember your fraction rules, right? You're going across 3 over 3. That means that y was 1. These are the points I'm going to graph. So finally, if x is 6, I'm taking 1/3 of 6. Well, 1/3 of 6 is 2. Now I'm going to plot these points. When x is -6, y was -2. When x was -3, I'm looking at my table of values, y was -1. When x was 0, y is 0. When x was 3, y was 1. And when x was 6, y was 2. So now my line has changed a little bit, and I could find these points, like take -5 and divide it by 3. But I know it is going to sit. Now let's see if I can draw a line. Oh, connect the dots, make big arrows, because that's what a line does. It continues on forever and ever. If I had made it fatter, it would have been perfect. There you go. There's my line. This is my line. Y equals 1/3 of x. All right. I'm going to get you to try the last one. Here's the line I want you to graph. Y equals 2x minus 3. I want you to pick some points for x, and I want you to find the y. So you're going to have to substitute it into the equation. Y equals 2 times x minus 3. Remember, I want to know what's happening around the origin. And remember, I want you to graph your line so it continues on and it has arrows at the end beyond the points you find in your table of value. I'm going to check for this one tomorrow. And if you're not done, please try and glue in your ISN Mod 2. All right, that's it for me today.